But there's a lot of stuff because it's like April 1st. So like a
Hmm.
lot of people, a lot of things you're gonna look at and they're gonna be like, you check the date and you're like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like Roy Williams like retiring, everybody was like, oh, like it's April, like thought it was an April Fool's thing, but he really is like retiring. But one thing about April 1st is it is the beginning of Autism Awareness Month. You know me, I don't really show it because it's a really bad tattoo.
Wow,
Um,
I never saw it.
but I have like yeah, see, I really don't because it's really a bad tattoo. I want to get it like touched up. The artist that did it, it was back when my sister and my brother-in-law had a tattoo spot and they were doing free tattoos for autism. Like you get like a small tattoo for free, and any design within certain parameters
Right.
you could have got whatever tattoo you wanted. So I my little brother is autistic, so I got the autism sign tattooed on me, so I want to get it touched up. But it is Autism Awareness Month. I actually donated $25 to AEW and the NBA. They hooked up with
I saw the Big Show was involved, or Paul White,
yeah, Autism
Randy.
Acceptance Month by, and it's All Elite Wrestling, and it's them and it's the NBA, and they linked up with culturecity.org. So if you want to donate to that, it's www.awcares.com. And anything. I dropped $25. That was like what was already there. So I was like, you either spend $25 on some nonsense or you can spend $25 on this, but you just, donate whatever you can.
Yeah, well, I'm wearing the blue because that's apparently, that's like the colors,
Yes.
and uh, uh, I have a connection to it. My cousin, like he's close, really close to my age. Um, he's like nonverbal, and like I've never
Hmm.
like never heard him speak, and he's like 20 something, like 26 or something like that. And so I grew up with that, and it was always like I learned that like very quickly. This was like the 90s. Also, I have a like my girlfriend is a early education
Hmm.
teacher,
Yeah, yeah.
and she has to decide. Like, she has go mainstream or schooling, or maybe like that's her like job, pretty much. And actually, speaking of donations, I forget the organization that we did it for, but I think on the show I mentioned a lot that I do like a pro wrestling trivia show. So this year we did something else, but last year we did it right before the month of the April. So that was like, that's another thing. You're like, oh, spend $25 on something silly. Hey, we were doing something silly, like a wrestling trivia thing, but there
Hmm.
was a deeper meaning to it, which I'll throw a link on it too. That's up on their Pro Wrestling Melee's YouTube still. It was from like a year ago. The
Yeah.
last event I did before lockdown. So
Yeah, and it's interesting you talk about like early education and early intervention because there's a lot of signs that kids show, and I always there's a commercial that it shows on on a Yes network when I'm watching like stuff on a Yes network, and sometimes it pops up on other channels, and it's by Autism Speaks, which
mm,
is something me and my family have been like attached with ever since we found out that my brother was autistic. And it's a commercial where they show like kids, like toddlers, and they kind of display the characteristics or the symptoms of an autistic child, where the type of behavior, it seems like peculiar and it seems like something's wrong with the child, but in actuality, once you could spot those signs, it's a lot easier to get that child the help they need, because Mike's significant other, like she works with early education, and decide when whether kids will need special education or they could go mainstream. Like my brother, when he was very younger, like he was very advanced in
mm,
some kind of subject. I forgot what it was, but he was advanced for a special needs child. So he was at the time in a school that was a regular old public school, but they had like an annex school for special education children, and they thought like they would be able to bring him into like a mainstream class, like a regular, or that's the word you're not really supposed to use, typical, a class for typical children, because children on the spectrum, they're atypical, meaning they're not like the children who might not need that extra help. They put him in our class, and then they saw his grades go from like A's and B's to like C's and D's and F's. And then it was, obviously realized that he needed that special education in order to um develop and learn at the rate a typical child would. So these things are very, very like near and dear to my heart. Like I get very, very emotional when talking about it. Like remember when we talked about the child, the child who was harassed and bullied by the NFL draftee. Like I get really emotional about it, but it really doesn't take like somebody being in your family or somebody um close to you for you to understand the what goes into caring for a child with autism. Such things as not to associate a lot of the things we used to as kids tease kids for, such as, oh, like, you rode the short bus here, or the R word. Like
Mm.
I really hate that word. I remember like we had a coworker, me and you, Mike, where me and him were working, and we were talking about it, and he was like, my cousin's kind of R word. And I turned to him, I'm like, dude, like, I was like, listen, like, I understand, like, you probably aren't like sensitive to it, but I just prefer you not use that word. And then like the same conversation, like 2 sentences later, he was like, first he was like, yeah, yeah, I understand, blah blah blah. And then 2 sentences later he used it again. So it's like back to square one, but it's ridiculous. So yeah, anytime this month you could, either donate or either educate yourself on autism and the autism spectrum, please do that. It's very worthwhile to make this world a place, where we could be inclusive and not look at people as there being something wrong with them, and just looking at them as if they're just different. And we got to be understanding and compassionate.
You actually brought up work.
Hmm.
Very recently, I work in a place where it's like a lot of people I work with are like a generation younger than me. And there's a gentleman who he comes in often, and he wants to individually say goodbye to everyone. It'd be like six of us working. Goodbye. Like he keeps saying it like over and over again. And like one of the youngest one was kind of like, oh, that guy's weird, like laughing. And I looked at her, I was like, obviously, and then I wasn't gonna bring it up. But I was like, "Hey, how you doing, sir?" Yeah, and I was like, I saw it, like I was again sensitive to it. I stopped using that word probably like 20 years ago, a long time ago as a kid.
Yeah.
Um, but but that's like the earlier the better, because at some point when you're like 18 or 21, a lot of the government programs like it's done and you have to equip or prepare that post time for finding how can they like support like job vocational. That's another thing they do when they're like teenagers, like vocation jobs, something that they can do, like support themselves too, also with the family support. And now we're just gonna segue into this. I know you have something else to say, but a lot of things happened in the last year where people were not targeted, but like they were victims of violent acts, and they just didn't understand because like the behavioral, they didn't realize that the person had did
Hmm.
you know what I mean. And
Yeah.
many times people just think that either they're drunk, high, or just crazy. And a lot of people were lost that way if you look at the news.
Well, yeah, and the last thing I want to say is that the government and the Department of Education, they don't provide these things for you when you have children with autism. Like my family personally, they had to sue the state of New York and the Department of Education in order to get the right amount of funding that my brother would need in order to succeed in life and live a good life, whether that's learning, occupational therapy, all of those things. So much so that like my mom and dad, they would love to move out of New York City because the cost of living here is outrageous. But the only reason they'll tell you the only reason they're staying here is because if they move, then all of that stuff that they fought for my brother, they lose. So it's people. And the last thing, because I know we went on, but it's something really important. I'm glad we got to discuss it here in the intro. I'm gonna actually post this on the website just to raise awareness.
Immediately today, we'll do it.
Yeah, so if you're watching this, please share, and most of all share, because this is a testimony coming from the sibling of a person with autism. So I'm personally this is my personal experience, but the last thing I will say is the one thing I've learned, and is a consensus with me, my mom and my stepdad, is just that when you go, like, and my brother has been in several different schools all over. When you go to the school, you go to school events, or you meet um with teachers or anything like that, like autism, it's not discriminatory at all. Like, we've been to autism walks, we've been to schools, stuff like that. You see people who are middle class, people who are upper class. Um you see black people, white people, Asian people, Hispanic people. It's all different people and all different walks of life. And you know it, point being, it affects all of us. It affects everybody. It's not something that just like happens to black people, not something that happens to Latin people. It's not something that just happens to poor people. It's not something that happens to rich people. It happens to everybody. And these kids, they've we need to give them the assistance they need, and we also need to celebrate them because they're beautiful individuals. Like, I couldn't even imagine what life would be without my little brother. Like, he he's really that special to me.
Mm,
Yeah, I just
that's good, man.
yeah. I'm proud.
Um, Sorry, man. Take time. Actually, right now I'm looking at this. I did a walk for the school. It's Bird, and it's private, but they have to report to the Department of Education, so they have restrictions. Yet they are funded by like private things. So I have the thing, the T-shirt here. So we also pop that because they always look for donations because they're kind of funded by like people who are affected by it or live with it, who have money, like they have influence, and it's in New York City. They're also in Westchester, so we pop that in there too.
Yeah, so yeah, Mike, whenever I edit this and we put it up on YouTube, I'll put the links for the thing where AEW cares, for
Hmm.
anybody who would want to um donate.